Hello and welcome to Who Wore It Better, where I review Raw and Smackdown back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Yes, folks, Who Wore It Better is back after a week's hiatus when I was overseas in England. Just the short of it, folks, my time in England was just amazing. My time in London and then in Manchester was just awesome. It was a week I will not soon be forgetting, getting to work with and meet and talk to so many amazing individuals, so many awesome people, both in the YouTube, in the media community, and in wrestling, and the fans. Just great, top to bottom. I'll be having a bit of a travel vlog of my experience in England coming out in the next week or so be on the lookout for that. Also, just tons of stuff I got. I got great interviews. I got a couple of the episodes and just things shot. You'll see my recap of Internet Darlings next week. It was a really great experience overall. The one negative, of course, is all the jet lag. And I thought I was going to be okay coming back on Monday night because, oh, well, gosh, you know, it's late at night in Reno where I touched down and I've been up all day. So, yeah, I'll be able to adjust just fine. Go to sleep at night when I get home. It's going to be great. But no, because then last night I tried watching Smackdown. About a half hour in, I was ready to pass out. Like, oh, no. So I was able to muster up the energy to finish watching Smackdown. But I said, nope, there's no way I'm going to be recording Who Wore It Better right afterward. Not happening. So I basically am recording now Wednesday morning with a little bit more energy. And so here we go. Something cool that happened on Monday is that Renee Young is now the full-time third person at the announce desk for Raw. And I say good for her. That's great. You know, I think she did really well in her trial run, I guess a month and a half or so ago. And she's replacing Coachman. Everybody wins. And I think that on this night on Monday, I think her first full-time night, I think she was pretty good in her role. There was one point during the show where Cole specifically told her no cheering. But then I'm like, wait a minute, what about all the years that you were just the cheerleader for The Miz, you know, back in the early 2010s? But, you know, who cares about looking back in the past for that? Anyway, the opening segment of Raw is that Braun and friends enter the ring. By the way, Braun Strowman is 100% being portrayed as a heel here. I remember 2 weeks ago when he and Dolphin Drew beat up the Shield and so many fans in my comment section said, oh, come on, Brian. Braun's not turning heel. Pfft. Braun, Drew, and Dolph are in the ring, flanked by all their mid-card goons from the previous week who helped beat down the Shield. And, and including Kevin Owens, who just a few weeks ago quit the company after being beaten to death by Braun Strowman on a weekly basis. So there's the continuity issue there, but hey, at least he looks bored to be there. Braun makes a lot of dog-related puns, saying now this is the new pack of dogs and all this thing to counteract the Shield and the Hounds of Justice. The Shield come out and they beat up the baddies. Dean Ambrose produces a bag of axe handles, not kendo sticks, not baseball bats, not axes with the blades on them, just axe handles. I guess that must have been some kind of PG compromise to have axe handles with no blades attached to them, but we've seen like the kendo sticks used before. It was just really weird. Not my first go-to pick for a weapon. Anyway, they chase off Braun and friends, and then the next segment you see them like backstage talking to a bunch of cops or confronting a bunch of cops who are clearly not cops. And Baron Corbin comes in, tries to break it up and says, you know, the Shield have to leave the premises. If they come back, they will be arrested and stripped of their respective titles. But like, here's my thing when I watched that, it made me so mad. Could WWE not find one local talent in all of Louisiana and the surrounding areas who looked somewhat like a police officer, who looked somewhat like they had like the appearance and the discipline of a cop? Good Lord, those 5 guys they had in a row were just, no, they were not police officers. And you could just tell, why do only one of them have a hat? That was that's so confusing. Did he have some like weird bald spot they were trying to cover up? It was just so weird. It's like, people, if you're going to go there, like, you know, if you have some idea of what you're going to go into, like, try and look the part a little bit. I don't know. Or find better people if you're the company looking for extras. That's all I'm saying. And anyway, that whole thing about the Shield, you know, oh, they have to leave or they can't come back or they'll be arrested, that's important to note for later. Earlier in the day, the Bellas went to their private dressing room and found that their locker room was just completely vandalized with some very neatly written graffiti on the walls by the Riot Squad. Ooh, they so bad. Here's my thing with the graffiti, because it was a whole thing where I hear these like Bella phrases and then they were crossed out and then written over with something else. So the Riot Squad took the time to write a phrase and then cross it out. They vandalized their own graffiti with more vandalization. That is some deep level shit there. Anyway, our match here is Nikki Bella versus Ruby Riott. The Bellas beat Morgan and Logan last week, so this is the singles match follow-up to that. And it's Nikki, I believe it's Nikki's first singles match on TV since her feud with Carmella, I think ages ago, at least a year and a half ago. It was a decent enough match. Nikki wins with a Rack Attack 2.0 after Liv Morgan tries to interfere. It was what it was. After a recap of what happened between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels last week, we go to the AOP versus Ronnie Ace and Nathan Bradley. Of course, the big news last week with the AOP was that Drake Maverick, the 205 Live general manager, is now their manager as of last week, and he's doing the whole thing with baseball managers dressing up in uniform with their players. Like Drake Maverick's dressed like a little AOP member. It's so adorable, but he just sticks like a sore thumb. I mean, Paul Ellering just seemed like a much better fit for a lot of different reasons. Unless Drake changes his mannerisms up and does more than just dresses like his guys, that is going to be a tough thing for me to overcome, just that whole dynamic of Drake Maverick as their manager. Anyway, it's a squash match, and so AOP wins. Great. It would have been nice to have them do this kind of thing earlier before their weird kind of going nowhere feud with Titus Worldwide a month ago. We get a video package for the Orton Jeff Hardy rivalry on SmackDown. Then we have a promo from Triple H talking about his match in Melbourne against The Undertaker coming up, and he talks about when The Undertaker got up in HBK's grill last week on Raw. He says that The Undertaker lost respect not for Shawn or Triple H, but for Taker himself. That was Triple H's theory, at least. Out of the last little bit of respect that Triple H has for Taker, he says, "I will put you down." And where did I just hear this?
And I will run you down.
Son of a bitch, I missed Raw last week and the B team lose the Raw tag titles to Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre. Clearly I was their lucky charm. Be that as it may, I do like, on one hand, I do like the fact that Dolph and Drew won the belts because it helps give a little more legitimacy to the alliance between them and Braun Strowman, and it keeps, Dolph relevant after having lost the Intercontinental Championship, and it gives Drew a nice little accolade as well. That's all great, but my whole thing was that this kind of just completely derails, like, the program that the B team and the Revival were in the middle of at that time. It's not like it was over by any stretch. It's just like they never had the blow off because Dolph and Drew just literally just interjected. They physically inserted themselves into the picture and won the belts last week, and there you go. And now the Revival are just kind of like they're invisible again, which is unfortunate because I think they're really on a roll. And so I hope that after whatever happens with Drew and Dolph happens, and once they've run their course, the Revival can get back into it, but really who knows at this point. Dolph and Drew win the match handily against the B team in the rematch, and then they're jumped by Seth and Dean afterward, of course. And now it's important to note, they're not in their Shield attire. They've changed outfits since they left the arena, and now they're wearing their own merch and everything. So, that means they're going to go to jail and lose, and Seth's going to lose his title, right? And Roman's going to lose his, right? I get the picture that's not going to happen, but sure enough, backstage, Seth and Dean are confronted by GM Corbin, and it says, "Hey, there's no Shield here, man. It's just the two of us. Completely different set of circumstances for old Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose than there is for us two and Roman Reigns, so it doesn't count." And okay, that's very ticky-tack. And then they threaten to have Corbin arrested for falsifying a police report last week, which resulted in the Shield's arrest. And so Corbin calls their bluff, and they bring out this sheriff, and he starts reading the Miranda rights. So then Corbin eventually bends to their will, and he's negotiating something with Seth on the outside, in the office. Dean and the sheriff are talking outside, and then Seth, I got something figured out, we're good. And then, the guys walk away, and you can clearly see the name tag on the sheriff's, the sheriff, the officer, that he's got the same last name as Dean Ambrose. Now, that either could have been a very happy coincidence, or maybe the idea was that Dean has a relative in law enforcement in New Orleans, and he was trying to pull a favor, but that was never established. It's never made clear in the dialogue that that's what was happening. That would have been really interesting, I think, if Dean actually had a relative in law enforcement and got him to get them out of a jam, kind of get out of jail free card sort of thing, or not go to jail at all sort of card, I guess is what it would end up being. But that was never established, and so I guess are the fans left to to make that interpretation for themselves, or was this completely an accidental that this dude happened to also have the last name of Ambrose? Just something to think about. After a very well done package talking about the Hell in a Cell match from 1998 between Undertaker and Mankind, we then go to a match between Kevin Owens and Tyler Breeze. The match never really goes anywhere. They fight before the bell rings. KO powerbombs Breeze on the apron. Then he gets on the mic and explains why he came back after quitting the company the week before. He says that Corbin begged him to come back, and now he's back on the condition that he has carte blanche to do whatever he wants. He can't be held accountable for his actions, kind of like hanging out with Braun Strowman. He blames everything on Bobby Lashley, and he says the reason he quit, but he's also the reason he came back, was for Lashley. And then KO promises agony, anarchy, and destruction. Good Lord, can the writers please come up with some new words for these wrestlers to use? We get a hype package for the AJ Styles Samoa Joe feud on SmackDown. Boy, we're getting a lot of video packages on Raw, aren't we? And we're not done yet, folks. Then we go to a rematch from last week as the Ascension take on Chad Gable and Bobby Roode, who are a new team as of last week. And the whole story here is Gable's like super eager to fight and super eager to get Bobby Roode's acceptance. He's a little too eager in this match. Gets a lot of the heat early on. Graves and Renee Young both criticized Gable and also their lack of chemistry between the two, and put over the Ascension's chemistry as if that's, really been helping that team in the tag team ranks the last couple of years. Chad steals the tag a second time and gets the win for his team. I wonder why they portray Gable as this overeager kid just like dying for Roode's acceptance when at this point, up and before this, he was a pretty established veteran. Obviously he's not as tenured as Bobby Roode is in the grand scheme of things, but he's a multiple-time champion across NXT and SmackDown. And then when he was with the team with Shelton Benjamin, earlier this year, I should say, he was built as kind of like a tougher individual. And I was like, oh boy, he's kind of like this young dog. He's like this little puppy trying to chase around, hop around Bobby Roode. I'm really wondering, I'm not eagerly anticipating where this goes. I think it's a very weird, random, makeshift tag team. I don't think it has a lot of legs on it, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Backstage, Baron Corbin talks to Dolphin Drew and says they will be defending those Raw tag titles against Seth and Dean at Hell in the Cell. And basically he says the reason that the Shield aren't being, arrested and stripped of the titles, even though Seth and Dean showed up, is, Corbin invokes the Napoleonic Code of Louisiana, which is a real thing, by the way. And I was trying to look up what that exactly meant. Yesterday I tried to look it up, but how does this apply? And basically the biggest takeaway I got from Napoleonic law, or Napoleonic Code, was it basically means a judge can make a ruling based on their own interpretations of the law, not from prior courts. That's probably just one example of what that means, and I didn't have the time to look more into it, but I don't think that really applies to what's going on here with the Shield, so I don't know what this was. It's just, to me, the whole thing with, the Shield kind of flaunting it and coming back here and not being able to get arrested and everything. It just seems like it immediately takes away the power from Baron Corbin, which I just said a couple weeks ago he needed so badly to have. And, within 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of his run, he's already kind of made to be pantsed. Hopefully we'll see him get some more power back in the weeks to come. And again, say what you want about Baron Corbin, but I think as a heel authority figure, you need to have power. You need to be able to, show your teeth, so to speak. So this wasn't a good example of that this week. So we'll see what happens next week. Ronda Rousey and Natalya take on Alexa Bliss and Mickie James in tag team action. The story here, well, first of all, before the commercial break, we saw Ronda and Natalya hit the heart attack on Mickie James, I believe it was, just before the break. Is a nice little tribute to Jim Neidhart. Very nice. And then the whole story here is Ronda Rousey's ribs. She gets attacked on the outside, and then she's selling her ribs for the whole rest of the match. But after she works through it and makes Mickie tap out with the armbar, she immediately stops selling the ribs until Alexa reminds her of it and kicks her in the ribs after the match and the celebration and everything. So that's the story here, is how is Ronda going to be able to overcome this injury of hers against the wily, crafty Alexa Bliss going to Hell in a Cell? Time will tell. We get our final hype package of the night about Becky and Charlotte over on SmackDown. Then we go to Elias performing in the ring. He's interrupted by Mick Foley. Good to see him. He seems he's walking around pretty nice ever since his hip surgery, getting around there without a cane. He's there to commemorate the 20th anniversary of his infamous Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker. It's a few months late of the anniversary, but at least he's there to talk about it. Elias actually mentions in their promo that he was there at the Igloo in Pittsburgh when the match happened. A very neat little piece of trivia if it's true. Foley announces he'll be the special guest referee for the Braun Roman match at Hell in a Cell. Why? Who knows? He's had nothing to do with the storyline up until this point, and so, I mean, I'm sure he'll play into the finish somehow. Could be interesting, but it does seem a little forced. It seems like a little kind of a forced way to add a level of heat to this match where there is none, I guess. But also somehow he makes a match between Elias and Finn Balor immediately afterward. It's a pretty good match between those two, by the way, Elias and Finn. Finn wins the surprise roll-up. It's probably the best match of the night, though it's not really saying much. But in all seriousness, it was cool to see Foley make a little return here on this night, looking well, as I said before. And so, I mean, what impact will he have on the main event, or, you know, the Hell in a Cell match with Roman and Braun? I don't think he needs to be there, to be perfectly honest. It just does come from out of nowhere. It's kind of a way to try and drum up more interest in the show, but it seems kind of odd. Like, you know, between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and Undertaker's going to be there next week, by the way, between Taker, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Mick Foley, all kind of coming out of the woodwork, you know, in the last couple weeks, and this week and next week, it's just, they're definitely like pushing this nostalgia thing to try and get people to watch their shows, which is very disappointing. We see a backstage segment where Bobby Lashley is pumping iron, and Lio Rush from 205 Live is cheering him on as the new mouthpiece. I think it's probably the best thing for Bobby because he sorely needs a mouthpiece. Promos have never been his strong suit. Even at his best, he still kind of sounds like he's out of place. Like, he doesn't mean what he says. I'm curious to see whether he'll help Bobby get over more or not, because usually managers kind of equate to being a heel. And obviously, I don't think Bobby's turning heel anytime soon, especially if he's going to be feuding with Kevin Owens in the weeks to come. So I'm really curious to see where Lio Rush ends up in this equation. So now we've seen Drake Maverick with AOP, we've seen Lio Rush with Bobby Lashley, and we've also seen Drew Gulak as part of like the pack of dudes, like the Goons with Braun's big posse. So now are we finally beginning to see the integration of cruiserweights in the main roster that I have been calling for well over a year? If so, I think that's great. I think that's actually kind of a cool thing. It does seem odd that it's all cruiserweights and it's all happening at once. Like, why? Surely there are some other people in the lower card of the main roster who could use this bump that, you know, you're not giving them, you're giving the cruiserweights. But at the same time, I think a lot of these other guys on 205 Live have a lot of things to offer on the main roster, but with no like 205 Live exhibition match every week on Raw anymore. And the fact that they are limited in their size, they might not get that opportunity to show what they can do on Raw. So putting them in these kind of like secondary positions as managers, as overall goons, I think it's going to be good for these guys in the long run in terms of their exposure. But yeah, it is interesting. It's all kind of like they're unkinking the hose, and all of a sudden, all these cruiserweights show up. It's very interesting timing. The final segment here is the culmination of Braun, who for the better part of the third hour has been frantically searching the arena for Roman Reigns, because if Seth and Dean are back, that means Roman's somewhere too. So he's very angry, calls out Roman in the ring. Roman does appear. They have a fight. There's a Samoan drop off of the announce table onto a gimmicked floor and through it, and they create this little crater there, and Roman stands tall at the end. The crowd seems very apathetic to all of it, basically. I think it sucks that they've turned Strowman heel. And I mentioned this 2 weeks ago because he was your organically over guy going against a guy who they wanted to push as a babyface, but the fans weren't 100% into. And, you know, the whole Shield getting back together thing is kind of a way to remedy the lack of babyface heat for Roman, except when he's by himself, it's not exactly the same thing. And now you've got two guys who have just like, with the wrong kind of heat going for him. And it's like, I think Strowman as a heel with the posse and everything, I think it can work. And again, I missed a lot of the details overall last week, but I read the results and saw the highlights. So I'd like to see them kind of do more with this. I guess when you look at this situation, Foley was injected into the match because shit, like somebody's gotta get cheered. Before I move on to SmackDown, this week's Who Wore It Better is sponsored by SeatGeek. It's an app you can download for your iOS or Android device that gets you ticket deals for concerts, sporting events, WWE, you name it. You can find the deal you're looking for the best price thanks to SeatGeek. Download the app using the link in the top of this description. Go to the Accounts tab, type in the promo code Wregret, and get $20 back on your first ticket purchase. SmackDown opens up with some Jeff Hardy promo time. He cuts a promo on Randy Orton. And my favorite part about this whole segment, and I think it's kind of an unintentional, hilarious part, is that in between all of Jeff's sentences, you heard like one little kid in the audience like yelling at Jeff. Like the rest of the audience is so quiet that this one kid's like, da, ba, da, ba, da. That was pretty hilarious. Also, at one point, Jeff tries to sing the Obsolete song, and he tries to get everyone to sing Obsolete along with him, but like not a lot of people do. People have forgotten, unfortunately. We then go into the first match of the night, Jeff Hardy versus Shinsuke Nakamura. It's a really great opener from these two from the get-go. However, the match ends in a DQ when Orton shoves Hardy off the top turnbuckle and crotches him on the ropes and just beats on him. Very similar to what happened in the Jeff Shinsuke match from like the SmackDown after Extreme Rules for the U.S. Championship. Orton interferes, causes a DQ finish again. But Hardy does flip the script on Orton. Instead of getting beat down by Randy at the end, he ends up doing the beating on Randy, hits him with a steel chair, hits him with a swanton. He ends the segment strong going into Sunday. After a backstage promo where The Miz and Maurice talk trash about Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella, we go to a pre-recorded interview in an empty arena with AJ Styles talking about Samoa Joe. I think it was a really strong promo. He admits that his biggest weakness is his emotion, but he will not be intimidated by Samoa Joe. When the bell rings, the talking is over. I will talk more about this storyline here after the second half of this little build with Samoa Joe's promo a little later on. Charlotte Flair takes on Sonya Deville in some non-title action here. Some mat work early on by the two, which I liked. Very entertaining match between these two, ending with Charlotte going over with the figure 8. After the match, Charlotte's high-fiving fans, getting a selfie with people, and then she gets jumped from behind by a fan in the front row. Surprise, it's Becky Lynch in disguise. She takes off the wig and the glasses, she beats down Charlotte some more, puts her to disarm her. I think that like comparing to like the split screen promo they had last week, I think there was a lot less emotional oomph in this post-match beatdown than there was in that promo, but I think I still did a good job making Becky look like a threat to Charlotte going into their match at Hell in a Cell. So earlier we got AJ Styles pre-taped promo, and now we get Samoa Joe's pre-taped promo where he reads a bedtime story talking about how he's going to beat up AJ Styles, which is awesome in and of itself. But then the best part is the Photoshop drawing at the end or whatever of Samoa Joe holding the championship he's got AJ's wife and kid with him, like he's part of the family now. I thought that was pretty awesome. But here's the problem, and it's like it just feels like this WWE Championship feud, the top title on SmackDown and presumably in the company, is treated like a total afterthought here on SmackDown. The fact they don't open the show or close the show, there's these two pre-taped promos sprinkled throughout the middle of the show, I think that's a travesty. If you look at the top angles on SmackDown right now, you've got Hardy versus Orton, you've got The Miz and Maurice versus Daniel and Brie, you've got Charlotte and Becky, and you've got AJ and Joe. And right now, I feel that AJ and Joe is kind of down to the bottom of the pecking order of those three angles, which makes no sense because it's your top title. Also, for what's being built as a deeply personal rivalry, there's been very little physical interaction involved. I think that's kind of unfortunate. They try to do a lot of like world building and tone setting with like what they did last week. There was a bit of a scuffle there, but like it's been mostly promos going forth, and I think that's kind of unfortunate. Like between the way they've been building the story just by itself and then its place on the card, to me makes this build super lackluster. Up next, the Bar take on Rusev and Aiden English, where the winners will take on the New Day for the SmackDown tag titles at Hell in a Cell. Of course, the Bar earned their spot 2 weeks ago by winning that triple threat match, and then last week, Rusev and Aiden beat the Usos and Sanity to earn their spot here. I'm pretty sure I heard Corey Graves make a Prestige Worldwide kind of Step Brothers reference when talking about Rusev and Aiden. I thought that was pretty great. The match ends when Aiden actually takes a bullet for Rusev. He shoves Rusev out of the way, so he eats Sheamus's brogue kick, and then Rusev hits the Machka kick to win the match for his team. They'll take on the New Day on Sunday. I'm very excited. I think this is great. It's like Rusev's kind of been all over the place in terms of the card because 2 months ago he had a WWE Championship match. Then like at SummerSlam he's in the pre-show, and here he's going to be fighting for the SmackDown tag titles. It's more of a continuation of the build with he and Aiden, and after weeks of kind of like going down the card, now he's kind of moving back up and they're a team again. Yay, it feels good. Will this result in more blow-off later on? I'm not sure, probably, but it's good to see. I'm happy to be along for the ride at this point. Boy, I sure missed some interesting TV last week, didn't I? Apparently, Carmella has turned babyface now after her association with R-Truth, partly due to the Mixed Match Challenge, but also because, like, on the main show, R-Truth mistook Maurice for Carmella, and then that whole confusion. I guess now Carmella heard bad things about her from Maurice, and now she's a babyface by virtue of that. The logic of this babyface turn isn't all there. It's kind of of unrealized, but at the same time, I think there's more effort put in this than most face and heel turns as of late, I feel. R-Truth does have Carmella with him at ringside as he takes on Andrade Cien Almas. It won't be 2 wins in a row for R-Truth this time around because he beat The Miz in an upset last week, but this week, Almas beats Truth after a handful of jorts. Truth and Ty Dillinger and Carmella might be one of the weirdest, I guess to say, for lack of a better phrase, most universe mode combos I've seen in a while, but if they're given a chance to entertain on camera, I think it could work. As far as Carmella being a face, it makes sense right now because if they're going to push Maurice as a heel, if they're bringing her back into the fold, I think there's enough like heels on SmackDown right now in the female division that Carmella could take a break for a bit. Maybe she'll go back to being a heel after a while, but I think right now, kind of her being kind of put back in this thing as a babyface to flank R-Truth and possibly Ty, I think it's good for the short term. Main event time as Maurice takes on Brie Bella. It's Maurice's first singles match on SmackDown in 7 years. They had her come out to the Pourquoi theme, which I thought was great. Also good on her for coming out and getting back into in-ring shape 5 months after birthing a child. That is very impressive. Everyone's freaking out about the Bella twins. Everyone online, at least, is freaking out about, how did the Bella twins get to move from show to show? Blah. I'm like, hey, it's the John Cena contract, and they're part-timers. Really, why are you getting this upset about the Bella twins? The match doesn't really go anywhere because, the Brie calls out Maurice because she keeps powdering out of the ring. Brie calls her a coward. Miz takes umbrage and cuts a promo. The heels start to leave, but the faces bring him back in. There is a bit of wrestling here, but then Miz decks Brie mid-match. The match is thrown out. A big brawl with some ebbs and flows. Brie punches Miz in the face, and Daniel knocks him out of the ring. The faces stand tall to close the show. I didn't really care to see this match at all, much less than the main event, but the way they turn it into a brawl to close out the show, to continue the storyline, I think it was a good redirection. And honestly, I think people were kind of miffed at first when Maurice and Brie were brought into this feud with Daniel and The Miz. But right now, I think it's not an issue of, the wives are being brought into it. It's like they are part and parcel with the storyline now. They are being seen as equals in this feud, not as just kind of like secondary things to be tacked on to the overall storyline. It's an evolution of the storyline rather than just kind of like, it felt artificial at first, like an artificial inflation of the angle, but now feels like it's part of it, and I think that's actually a really good improvement. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, Raw or SmackDown, and this one to me is no contest. It's SmackDown winning for the week. I mean, what was there for me to enjoy about Raw? Seeing Mick Foley was nice. Leo Rush as a new mouthpiece to Bobby Lashley, I think is interesting. Again, that further integration of cruiserweights in the main roster. Yay for that. But man, this show was just like not doing it for me. I thought it was boring overall. Too many promo packages. That really slowed the show down. You think for as many promos as they showed, and I get it, it's go home week for Hell in a Cell, and that's what they were doing a lot of the pushing for, except for there was some time when they were pushing a lot of the stuff for like Super Showdown with Triple H and Taker. But all those other promos, and I get it because you only have so much time in the week to promote your pay-per-view, but it just seems that a lot of that could have been taken up with other matches and other segments to build up other things on your own show on Raw. The Shield somehow avoiding prison. If you're going to throw that whole thing out there, well, if they come back, they're going to be arrested and they're going to be stripped of the championships, and they come back anyway, and you give some really ticky-tack reason as to how they avoid going to prison, then why'd you bring that up in the first place? Why even enter that threat into the consciousness if you're going to have them throw that, if they have them defy that order and then not follow up on it with some bullshit excuse? That to me was really weird, and it didn't sit well with me. Like, it's Napoleonic Code, like, it's just so weird. It's worse than saying a title is held up in abeyance or escrow, using fancy words to say it's been held vacant. This to me is just a weird like window dressing to something that didn't need to happen at all. You could have had some other way to build that. With SmackDown, I don't think it was that great a go-home show either. I mean, it was by default a better go-home show and a stronger, more entertaining show. But, I just think that what really sticks in my craw with SmackDown right now is just a lack of emphasis on the Samoa Joe AJ Styles. It's like third or fourth in the hierarchy of major angles on SmackDown right now, which to me is the complete opposite of where it should be. And again, of all the matches on SmackDown that get the Hell in a Cell treatment, why is it Jeff and Orton and not like Charlotte Becky or AJ Joe, which are both way more like personal and they go back much further than this, Orton Shinsuke thing or Orton Hardy thing? Orton Hardy's going to be a good Hell in a Cell match. I'm not questioning that. These two, I think, are going to make use of their stipulation and do really well with it. But I'm saying in terms of just storyline and what else is on the table, I think you can get more mileage out of Hell in a Cell with those other two ones I just mentioned. Let me know what you guys thought about Raw and SmackDown this week in the comments section below, and be sure to vote which show you thought was better in the gimmick in the upper right hand corner of your screen. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com, and check out Patreon.com/WrestlingWithRegret for exclusive perks and bonus content. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.